No one remembered exactly when Earth fell silent. One moment we were screaming, protesting, begging the stars for mercy, and the next, the transmissions stopped. The alien empires shrugged it off like a minor inconvenience, a spark snuffed out in the void. After all, Earth was a backwater, a primitive world they had barely bothered to catalog. We weren't a threat. We weren't even interesting. In the grand councils of the stars, we were written off as a failure of natural selection. They didn't realize that silence wasn't surrender. Silence was strategy. It had started decades earlier. When the first ships of the Andari Syndicate cracked through Earth's atmosphere, they expected a people too weak to resist. They hit us hard, blasted cities into dust, enslaved millions, and stripped our oceans for their precious minerals. The survivors were herded into camps or left to rot in the ruins. The aliens thought that was the end of the story. But humans have a peculiar flaw. We don't break easily. Hidden deep underground, under mountains and ocean floors, in crumbling subway tunnels and forgotten bunkers, humanity built. We salvaged tech from the wrecks the Andari left behind. We dissected their machines, figured out their language, understood their weapons. We copied what we could, innovated what we couldn't, and quietly stitched it all together into something new, something terrifying. The galaxy moved on, forgetting us. The Andari fleet moved on to bigger targets, richer worlds. Only a skeletal force remained in orbit. A token garrison meant more to satisfy political requirements than anything else. Their arrogance insulated us. It gave us time. It gave us purpose. When the first of the dreadnoughts broke free of the Greenland ice, it sent no warning, no proud broadcast, no declaration of independence. It rose from the ice like a leviathan, dark and silent, plates of alien alloy stitched together with human stubbornness. The garrison didn't even notice it until it was too late. When the dreadnought's guns woke, they sang a song the stars hadn't heard in millennia. Pure, unfiltered rage. The orbital stations disintegrated under withering barrages of kinetic rounds and plasma lances. Their sleek Andari design crumpled like tin under the dreadnought's fury. Their calls for backup were intercepted, jammed, silenced just as easily. Earth wasn't just surviving anymore. We were hunting. I remember standing on the cracked concrete of New Boston, watching the burning debris rain down from the sky. People cheered, their fists raised, tears cutting paths through the grime on their faces. It wasn't just vengeance, it was something deeper. A primal surge of hope, something we hadn't dared feel for generations. The first dreadnought was called Vengeance. A name chosen not by some commander or general, we didn't have those anymore, but by a mechanic who had welded the last piece of its hull together. A name whispered in bunkers, painted in blood-red letters across its armored flanks. We didn't stop with one. Within weeks, 2 more rose from the jungles of the Amazon, stitched together by tribes who had once been thought lost to the world. Another clawed its way out of the crumbled ruins of old Shanghai. The dreadnoughts weren't clean, polished, or pretty. They were brutal, they were monstrous, and they were ours. When the Andari realized what was happening, they panicked. They sent a distress signal out to the wider galaxy. They begged for reinforcements. But by the time the response fleets were marshaled, Earth was already bristling with steel and fury. The galaxy thought Earth was defenseless. They were wrong. We had been silent because we were preparing to scream. The message that Earth had risen spread through the stars like wildfire. At first, no one believed it. How could a broken, conquered world, a primitive species, strike back? The Council of Nine, the self-proclaimed arbiters of galactic order, dismissed the early reports as isolated insurgencies. Some local governors even laughed about it. They called us a minor annoyance, a feral infestation. They weren't laughing when Vengeance and her sisters, Defiance, Wrath, and Ashbourne, punched through the Andari main fleet like a fist through glass. They came expecting a mop-up operation. Neatly coordinated formations of sleek cruisers, carriers the size of cities, even a few dreadnoughts of their own. Real ones, built with centuries of alien engineering. They thought numbers and technology would win the day. But humans, we didn't fight fair. We fought like animals with nothing left to lose. The battle over Earth wasn't a grand dance of strategy and honor like the Andari were used to. It was brutal. It was messy. We unleashed everything we had. Hacked alien missiles, magnetic railguns firing chunks of urban scrap, jury-rigged plasma torpedoes so unstable they sometimes exploded before even leaving the launch bay. It didn't matter. The dreadnoughts were designed to take punishment no sane engineer would expect anything to survive. Defiance took a full barrage to her bow and kept charging forward, engines bleeding plasma, guns still spitting death. Wrath lost half her armor plating early in the fight, but used her exposed reactor core like a battering ram, slamming into an Andari command ship and tearing it in two. And from the ground, from the shattered cities and deep hidden fortresses, we launched wave after wave of attacks. Old ICBMs we had refitted with alien tech, hybrid fighters stitched together from F-22 relics and stolen anti-grav drives, even orbital jump troopers in crude suits patched together with desperation and genius. We didn't ask for surrender. We didn't give warnings. The Andari screamed for retreat. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. And when it was over, when the last Andari carrier burned up in Earth's atmosphere, raining molten wreckage over the Pacific, the survivors of humanity stood in the ruins, bruised, bloodied, and victorious. We had made our statement. Earth was not a slave world, not a forgotten colony, not a footnote. We were the storm. But we knew the galaxy wouldn't just sit back and let it go. The Council of Nine wasn't just going to pretend this didn't happen. Earth was a stain on their perfect little empire now, a slap in the face to their authority. And worse, if we could rise up, others might too. We gave the galaxy an idea it could never kill. So we didn't wait for them to come. While they debated and plotted and sent scouts to probe the edges of our system, humanity was already building more ships, faster, deadlier, crazier than anything the Council had ever seen. We stripped every Andari wreck down to its bones. We plundered their databanks, reverse-engineered their secrets, rewired their technology into brutal new weapons they could barely recognize. New dreadnoughts rose. Not the clunky, desperate monsters we had built at first, but true terrors, sleek and lethal, designed by human engineers who now understood exactly how to break alien tech better than the aliens themselves. We gave them names that echoed across the stars. Fury, Revenant, Oblivion. And behind every ship, every missile, every blade of steel, there was a voice whispering the same message. We remember. Every atrocity, every city turned to ash, every child dragged away in chains, every scream ignored by a galaxy that had decided Earth wasn't worth saving. We remembered. And we were coming. The dreadnoughts weren't just defense anymore. They were our answer. They were our revenge. The Council's first real sign of fear came when the colony world of Trivar fell. Trivar wasn't just any world. It was a jewel of the Andari Syndicate, a glittering metropolis set against endless fields of engineered crops and oceans so clear you could see the reefs from orbit. It had never known war. It had barely even known violence. It was a prize, a symbol of the Council's dominance and civility, a perfect world made by enlightened hands. We shattered it in a single night. The fleet that descended on Trivar wasn't large, barely a dozen dreadnoughts, escorted by a ragtag swarm of repurposed Andari corvettes and frigates now crewed by furious humans. We didn't bring diplomats. We didn't bring ultimatums. We brought fire. The first warning the Trivarans got was when Oblivion broke their orbital defense ring in half with a single volley. Massive shards of twisted metal rained from the sky, igniting the crops and setting the oceans boiling in places. Their governor tried to open negotiations, offered tribute, offered surrender. We ignored him. Our ground forces deployed like a hammer blow. Dropships that looked like burning meteors punched into their polished cities, unloading soldiers in armored exosuits patched together from decades-old Terran tech and alien shielding. We didn't bother with holding territory. We weren't there to conquer. We were there to send a message. Factories were gutted. Starports turned into smoking craters. Their food reserves, the pride of their terraforming, were salted with chemical fire. Broadcast towers were hacked to loop one simple message over and over in every language of the Council. Earth remembers. The civilians were spared, mostly. We weren't monsters. But anyone wearing the uniform of the Syndicate, anyone holding a weapon against us, anyone who dared to call humanity vermin, they weren't shown an ounce of mercy. By the time we pulled out, Trivar was a blackened, burning scar visible from orbit. The galaxy noticed. Suddenly, Earth wasn't just a minor rebellion. We were a contagion. A ghost. A nightmare whispered in council halls and military briefings. Recruitment on Outer Rim worlds plummeted. Slaves in the mining colonies began rioting, screaming human war chants in languages the Council thought had been wiped out. Trade convoys rerouted, fleeing entire sectors where the human dreadnoughts had last been spotted. The Council tried to retaliate, of course. They always do. They dispatched the 12th Expeditionary Force, an armada big enough to crush most systems without breaking a sweat. Veterans, war-hardened admirals, ships that could level continents. We didn't face them head-on. We led them into the Helix Nebula, where the magnetic storms fried sensors and ionized weapons. We baited them, harassed them, sliced apart their supply lines, dragged them deeper and deeper into the chaos. When the main fleet was helpless and blind, Vengeance and Ashborn hit them like wolves tearing into a wounded bull. In 3 days, the 12th Expeditionary Force ceased to exist. Their flagship, the Glory of Tyrix, was found adrift, its engines gutted, its bridge crew slaughtered by boarding parties who left only one thing behind: a flag. Earth's flag, stitched by hand, fluttering in the stale, recycled air of their command deck. The Council's facade cracked then. They stopped calling us a rebellion. They started calling us something worse, a blight on galactic order, a species without restraint. The humans, the monsters who burn worlds. Good. We wanted them scared, because fear, we had learned, was the only language they understood. And we were fluent now. The Council of Nine had built their empire on fear, on the belief that order could be maintained with enough force and enough examples made of those who defied them. Their history was written in blood, in the crushed bones of those who had dared to rise. They had seen rebellions before, tiny, desperate things that sparked and died within a generation. They had never faced something like us. By the time news of Trivar's fall reached the Council's inner worlds, panic was already setting in. Merchant guilds demanded extra military escorts at triple the cost. Border colonies whispered of secession. Slave revolts ignited like wildfire across the rim. Humanity wasn't just a rebellion anymore. We were an infection, one that was spreading through the rot the Council had long tried to hide. And so the Council made a decision born of pure terror. They activated the Virox Protocol. It wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. No dreadnoughts, no soldiers, no fleets. It was a plague, a bioengineered virus, one the Council had secretly created long ago for situations just like this. It was designed to spread fast and kill faster, targeting humans specifically, exploiting the tiniest quirks of our biology to make it unstoppable. They deployed it through Black Ops ships, sleek, near-invisible stealth craft that slipped into human-held territories, dumping canisters into the atmosphere before vanishing into the void. Their plan was simple: kill humanity not in battle, but in the shadows, quietly, efficiently, without the spectacle of open war, no blood-soaked fields, no heroic last stands. Just a slow, agonizing death whispered across the stars. The first signs came in the outer reaches. A mining outpost in the ruins of old Luna reported sudden sickness, coughing, fevers, hemorrhaging. By the time anyone realized it wasn't natural, it was too late. Whole settlements went dark overnight. At first we thought we were finished. For all our rage, all our weapons, we couldn't shoot a virus. We couldn't outfight it with dreadnoughts. It was invisible, relentless, and it was killing our people by the thousands. I remember standing in the sick bays of vengeance, watching rows of cots filled with men and women who had survived orbital bombardments, ground invasions, and firefights in the black, now brought low by something they couldn't even see. Some wept, some cursed, some simply lay there, staring at the ceilings, waiting for the end. It should have broken us, but it didn't, because humans, when cornered, don't just fight, we adapt. The Council thought we would roll over and die. They didn't understand that Earth's history was written in plagues and survival. From Black Death to smallpox, from chemical warfare to nuclear winters, suffering was carved into our DNA. We moved fast. Quarantine zones popped up within hours. Every medic, every biologist, every half-trained chemist was drafted into the fight. Old medical research facilities, some buried for centuries, were dug out, reactivated, staffed by volunteers who knew they were walking into death. And from the ashes of our dying, we found a miracle. Not a cure, not at first, but something better. Resistance. Some of us didn't get sick. Some who did recovered faster than we thought possible. Genetic outliers, freaks of biology, evolution in real time. We harvested blood samples, sequenced DNA with hacked alien tech, and within weeks, our scientists had spliced together a vaccine. It wasn't perfect. It left scars, weakened lungs, twitching muscles. But it meant we didn't die. And once we knew we could survive, the rage came back, sharper than ever. The Council hadn't just tried to kill us, they had tried to erase us, like vermin. We couldn't forgive that. We wouldn't. The next wave of attacks was merciless. We hunted their Black Ops ships like wolves. We tracked down every Virox deployment vessel and ripped them apart with a vengeance that terrified even our own allies. No prisoners, no survivors. We found one of their main labs hidden in the asteroid belt of the Torix system, a fortress buried deep in rock, shielded from detection. It didn't matter. Ashbourne tore the asteroid apart with orbital rail cannons, reducing centuries of research to molten slag in seconds. For every human they had tried to kill, we burned 100 of theirs. Fear? They had only tasted the beginning. The Council wanted to erase humanity. Instead, they had forged an enemy that would never, ever forget. The Council's retaliation had been brutal, but it had failed. The Virox virus, their so-called ultimate weapon, had only hardened our resolve. And now, the galaxy that once saw Earth as a broken ember began to whisper a new word in fear: vengeance. We didn't just survive the plague. We adapted, evolved, and unleashed a war the Council had no idea how to contain. The Council worlds had always lived behind walls, massive orbital defenses, fleets stationed in fixed patterns, confident that no enemy could ever reach so deep into their protected heartlands. Their arrogance had been their armor. Now, it was their greatest weakness. We didn't launch conventional invasions. We didn't line our ships up for honor and ceremony like they expected. Instead, we slipped past their outer defenses using stolen stealth tech. We hacked their security nets, rewrote their patrol schedules, corrupted their long-range sensors. We became their nightmares. The first world to fall was Vashara Prime, a council breadbasket planet. It wasn't a massive battle, no heroic last stand or fiery fleet clash. No, it was death by 1,000 cuts. Small commando teams dropped from cloaked frigates, infiltrated the cities at night. Power grids were sabotaged, food supplies poisoned, communications blacked out. When we finally revealed ourselves, it wasn't with guns blazing. It was with an ultimatum. Withdraw from all human-occupied systems or watch your worlds burn one by one. They didn't listen, so we set Vashara Prime ablaze. Dreadnoughts descended from orbit, hammering the planetary shields until they cracked like eggshells. Once the barriers failed, we launched kinetic strikes. Rods of tungsten accelerated to near relativistic speeds. They hit with the force of small nuclear weapons, obliterating council garrisons and capital cities alike. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were making sure no one ever forgot Earth again. Word spread faster than our ships could move. Worlds surrendered before we even arrived. Council governors abandoned their posts, fleeing in luxury cruisers while their citizens rioted and begged for protection. Some tried to form militias, but they had no training, no unity. They had been too comfortable for too long. And we had been forged in fire. Meanwhile, the council itself began to fracture. The weaker species, the ones who had only gone along with the council's rule out of fear, started questioning everything. Why die for an empire that couldn't even protect its own heartlands? Why obey leaders who couldn't stop a single primitive species from carving a path of fire across their worlds? Rebellions broke out in the Drask sectors. Slave uprisings toppled colonial governors across the Ghent Rim. Even some council fleets mutinied, their crews refusing to fight a war they knew was lost. The council leaders, bloated, terrified aristocrats, huddled in their fortified palaces, sending increasingly desperate calls for aid, for unity, for something that could stop the human tide. No one answered, because deep down, they knew there was no saving them. We were not diplomats. We were not liberators. We were not conquerors seeking thrones or tribute. We were the consequence of centuries of cruelty, finally unleashed. And still, despite the victories, despite the crumbling of their mighty empire, we knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because at the heart of the Council of Nine was the world of Tarsus, a planet so heavily defended it had never seen an enemy fleet in orbit. Their true capital, their true pride. If we wanted to end the Council once and for all, we had to take Tarsus. We had to show the galaxy that there would be no more mercy. The fleet gathered. Vengeance, defiance, wrath, Ashborn, fury, oblivion, and a dozen more dreadnoughts forged from blood, rage, and genius. Around them swarmed an armada of salvaged, cobbled-together warships, crewed by survivors, by warriors, by humans who had nothing left to lose. We didn't broadcast a warning. We didn't offer surrender. We just set course. And as we sailed into the black, engines burning like angry stars, every ship carried the same message etched into their hulls. Earth remembers. Tarsus awaited. And so did our final reckoning. The final march to Tarsus wasn't silent. Across every human ship, from the towering dreadnoughts to the battered frigates still pockmarked with old battle scars, music blared through the corridors. Old Earth songs, war cries from a dozen cultures, stitched together in a roaring chorus of defiance. Some sang, some prayed, some just sat quietly, sharpening blades or checking weapons one last time. Because everyone understood, this wasn't just another battle. This was the end of a war centuries in the making. Tarsus loomed ahead, a jewel wrapped in armor. Massive defense platforms orbited it in tight formations, bristling with railguns, plasma cannons, and shield generators. Entire fleets patrolled the skies, sleek council ships gleaming under the light of their twin suns. Automated mines floated in thick belts around every possible approach vector. If Earth had tried to storm Tarsus at the beginning of the war, we would have been crushed in minutes. But this wasn't the beginning. We weren't the broken, desperate remnants anymore. We were death, sharpened to a fine edge. Our attack began not with a frontal assault, but with the unexpected. In the weeks before the final approach, human infiltration teams had slipped into the outer layers of the Tarsus defense network. Some were dropped from stealth ships. Others disguised themselves as council maintenance crews, or slavers. Slowly, methodically, they infected the council's pristine systems with viruses of our own making, not biological this time, but digital ones. And when we arrived, when the first human dreadnoughts breached sensor range, the virus activated. Chaos erupted. Defense platforms turned their guns inward, misreading council ships as enemies. Shield grids flickered and collapsed. Patrol formations broke apart in confusion. Communications jammed under an avalanche of false signals. Half the Tarsus fleet didn't even realize they were under attack until plasma beams began shearing through their hulls. Oblivion led the first wave, her prow cutting through the wreckage like a blade. Kinetic slugs the size of buses slammed into crippled ships, turning them into spinning, molten wrecks. Boarding pods launched in thick volleys, slamming into station hulls and disgorging squads of armored human marines, brutal, relentless, and armed with weapons designed for close-quarters slaughter. Tarsus fought back, of course. The council admirals weren't fools. Even crippled, their fleets were monstrous. And for every ship we destroyed, we lost 2 or 3 of our own. Some dreadnoughts went down in flames, surrounded and overwhelmed. I watched Ashbourne, the dreadnought that had torn through the 12th Expeditionary Force, take a direct hit to her reactor and explode in a shockwave so bright it blinded half our fleet's sensors. We didn't slow down. We couldn't. The Council's flagship, the Pride of Tarsus, tried to rally a defense near the equator, where the shield network had been patched together at the last minute. It was a beautiful ship. Elegant, curved, plated in layers of silver and gold, a testament to everything the Council thought they were. Vengeance met it head-on. There were no speeches, no negotiations, just 2 titanic war machines tearing into each other with a ferocity that made the stars seem to tremble. We watched from every ship, every battered bridge, as vengeance rammed the Pride of Tarsus at full speed, smashing through its armor, gutting it from bow to stern. Explosions cascaded down its length. Escape pods fired blindly into space, some shredded by debris before they could clear the wreckage. And when vengeance drifted free, scarred and burning but still alive, a cheer went up that shook the fleet. Tarsus's skies fell silent. But we weren't done. Dropships poured toward the planet's surface. Human boots hit the ground in cities that had never known invasion. In the Council's great palaces, the senators and nobles who had ruled the galaxy cowered behind guards, praying that mercy still existed in a world they had taught only cruelty. It didn't. We weren't there to negotiate terms. We weren't there to sign treaties. We were there to end them, once and for all. The ground beneath Tarsus had never known the tread of enemy boots. For centuries, the Council's seat of power had stood untouchable, its marble towers and golden domes symbols of their dominion over the stars. Even in their darkest wars, no invader had ever reached their homeworld. It had been unthinkable. Until now. The dropships came like a storm, black shapes streaking through the atmosphere, dodging what little ground-to-air resistance remained. We didn't come in perfect military formations, the way the Council armies had trained for. We came in chaotic, furious waves, hitting every district, every fortress, every seat of power all at once, and the Council's elite security forces, dressed in their polished armor and armed with their precision rifles, were utterly overwhelmed. The first city we took was Solari Prime, a glittering metropolis of ivory towers and suspended gardens, home to some of the wealthiest families in the galaxy. Our landing pods smashed through their crystalline skyways, through rooftop gardens and lush estates. Soldiers in mismatched armor, some wearing the old flags of Earth's forgotten nations, some draped only in rags, tore through the streets with brutal efficiency. The Council guards fought bravely, but they were too slow, too cautious, too used to fighting enemies who feared them. We weren't afraid. We hunted them through their mansions and palaces, through streets paved with gold, through cathedrals built to glorify their benevolent rule. We fought with savage precision, driving them back street by street, building by building. And when the smoke cleared, the banners of Earth, stitched by hand, made of scavenged cloth and blood-stained canvas, flew from every tower. In the main plaza of Solari Prime, they tried one last stand. 1,000 Council guards rallied around the Senate Hall, the heart of their government. Their leaders, the ancient and decrepit Lords of the Nine, watched from the marble steps as their soldiers formed walls of shields, bracing for the human charge. It didn't save them. The assault was merciless. Our plasma throwers tore through their ranks. Railguns ripped holes through their armored lines. The sounds of screaming and gunfire echoed against the ancient stone for hours. And when it was done, when the last Council soldier lay broken in the blood-soaked square, we turned our eyes to the Senate Hall itself. The Lords of the Nine tried to parley. They sent out envoys under white flags, desperate and trembling, offering promises of peace, reparations, autonomy. They begged us to negotiate, to be reasonable, to show the mercy that defines civilized peoples. But we hadn't come for mercy. We had come for justice, and justice for Earth had no place for treaties. The lords were dragged from their thrones, stripped of their robes, and paraded before the survivors of humanity. Soldiers whose homes had been burned, whose families had been stolen, whose memories were etched with the scars of Council cruelty. No speeches were made, no verdicts announced. One by one, they were executed in the plaza where they had once decreed our suffering. The galaxy watched it unfold. We made sure of that. Every surviving Council communication line, every broadcasting network, every long-range relay was hacked. Billions across 1,000 worlds watched as the so-called gods of the galaxy were brought low by the species they had tried to erase. The message was clear. Earth remembers. After the executions, we didn't stay long. We weren't conquerors seeking to sit on the same thrones the Council had defiled. We weren't there to rule Tarsus. We had no interest in building a new empire on the bones of the old one. We came to burn the rot away. And once the rot was gone, we left the ashes to the stars. As we withdrew, fires raged across the Council cities. Statues toppled, vaults were opened, vaults filled with the treasures of 1,000 enslaved worlds. Some we took back, some we destroyed, some we left for others to reclaim. Because we knew the galaxy had changed forever. Tarsus was the final blow. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about memory. Humanity would never be forgotten again. No longer the footnotes of galactic history. No longer the silent, broken species shivering in the shadows. We had carved our place in blood and steel, and no one would dare erase us now. The Council was dead, its empire shattered, and humanity, battered and scarred, stood alone beneath alien stars, free at last. In the weeks following the fall of Tarsus, the galaxy held its breath. The mighty Council of Nine, the rulers of 1,000 systems, the arbiters of law, the architects of centuries of oppression, was no more. Their palaces lay in ruins. Their fleets, once the pride of the stars, drifted as shattered wreckage. Their banners, once feared across the galaxies, were trampled underfoot and forgotten. And at the heart of it all stood humanity, bloodied, battered, and unbowed. We didn't immediately claim new territory. We didn't rush to carve out a new empire from the remains of the old. That wasn't why we had fought. We hadn't bled across 100 worlds just to become another council, another tyranny in different colors. We had fought for freedom. But we understood, even in our victory, that freedom was a fragile thing. The surviving council species, the ones that hadn't fought us, the ones who had either surrendered or sat the war out, approached cautiously. Emissaries, traitors, would-be diplomats flooded into human-occupied space, offering treaties, alliances, apologies. Some were genuine. Most were terrified. They all wanted the same thing: reassurance. They wanted humanity to tell them that the storm was over, that the monsters who had shattered the Council of Nine were content now, that we would not turn our wrath on them next. We gave them no such assurances. Instead, we did something far more terrifying. We told the truth. In a message broadcast across every known channel, on every frequency and in every language, humanity spoke with one voice. It wasn't a speech filled with flowery promises or political cleverness. It was simple, honest, brutal. We are not conquerors. We are not rulers. We are not interested in rebuilding the galaxy you once knew. But we remember. We remember the chains, the whips, the camps, the silenced screams beneath alien suns. And we remember who helped and who watched. If you raise a new council, a new empire built on cruelty, on slavery, on the broken backs of the weak, we will return. We will burn it all again. This is our only warning. The message ended not with a declaration of leadership or a pledge of peace, but with a montage of the fallen council worlds, images of burning palaces, shattered fleets, statues crumbling into dust. It was a reminder, a promise written in the language of fire. The galaxy listened, and for the first time in generations, it understood humility. Across the former council territories, the old systems collapsed. Some planets declared independence, building new governments free of their old chains. Others fell into chaos, struggling to survive without the iron grip of their former masters. Trade routes shifted. Alliances crumbled. Armies mutinied. New powers rose, some hopeful, some darker than anything before. And through it all, humanity watched. We didn't rush to interfere. We didn't sit in judgment. We had fought our war. Now the galaxy would have to fight its own battles. On Earth, the first real celebrations in living memory began. Cities rose from the ashes, not sterile council-styled structures, but messy, vibrant places filled with laughter, arguments, music, and life. Statues were built, not to rulers, but to the nameless millions who had fought and died for the right to exist. Every year, the anniversary of Tarsus's fall was remembered not with parades of soldiers, but with silence, a moment to remember what had been lost and what had been won. The dreadnoughts, vengeance, wrath, defiance, and the others were not retired. They were repaired, upgraded, and kept ready. Not because humanity sought new wars, but because we knew the truth better than anyone else now. Peace is never permanent. Freedom is never free. Somewhere out in the void, there would always be another tyrant waiting to rise, another empire thinking it could treat sentient life like property, another power arrogant enough to forget the lessons written in the burning skies of Tarsus. When that day came, humanity would be ready. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the sword waiting in the darkness. And carved into the hull of every dreadnought, etched deep into their armored bones, was the simple phrase that the galaxy would never again dare to ignore. Earth remembers. The stars had always seemed so quiet, peaceful even. For centuries, civilizations across the galaxy thought Earth was just another primitive planet, a blue rock tucked in a backwater system with nothing more than wildlife and weak, emotional bipeds trying to survive. The Galactic Order had thousands of reports filed under Earth. Unremarkable, inhospitable to advanced culture, no immediate threat. That was their first mistake. Captain Zivar of the Ular Dominion didn't want the assignment. He was too seasoned, too decorated for a mission like this, babysitting a scouting crew, orbiting a planet full of loud mammals and cheap entertainment broadcasts. Insulting. He had seen real war, fought in the blood wars of Thral, led fleets against the Morkathi Empire. Earth was a joke, but the jokes stopped 3 hours after landing. The scout team never returned. They had touched down in a rural part of the North American sector, somewhere called Montana, according to the outdated Earth maps they'd translated. A forested area with scattered settlements and minimal tech signals. It was supposed to be safe. Zivar had approved the drop himself, confident that the small 6-being team would gather the samples, set up monitoring beacons, and return by evening. But the sun set. The Earth grew dark, and the team was silent. No signals, no distress calls, just gone. Zivar's ship, the Tyrannax, hovered in low orbit, cloaked from human tech. He stood in the observation deck, staring at the planet below with a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Commander," the navigator's voice broke the silence. "We're receiving a transmission, encrypted, old frequency, but it's coming from the surface." Zivar frowned. "Play it." The audio crackled, distorted, but it was unmistakably a voice, a human one. "You shouldn't have come here," it said. Calm, measured, too calm. Then a second voice, colder. "We know what you're looking for. We've been waiting." Zivar's blood ran cold. "Trace it. Now." His crew scrambled, pulling data, locking onto coordinates. It was close to the original landing zone. Same area, same trees, but different now. The trees were gone. Burned. "Captain," the tactical officer said, eyes wide. "The scout ship. It's been dismantled. No sign of the team. But, there's something else." A hollow image projected above them. A crude but efficient structure built from the wreckage. Barriers, perimeter sensors, cameras, and standing among it all were humans, armed, ready. "They turned our own tech against us," Zivar muttered, "in under a day." No species was that fast. Unless he issued the order himself. A retrieval squad, 10 of their best. Stealth armor, plasma rifles, neural dampeners. In and out, quick extraction. Only 2 made it back, and they weren't unscathed. One was missing a leg. The other, his mind shattered, eyes hollow, muttering nonsense over and over. "They smiled while they killed us," he kept repeating. "They smiled, like they were made for it." Zivar finally began to understand. Earth wasn't primitive. It was hiding, waiting. A planet of apex predators that had evolved not to hunt animals, but each other. For thousands of years, war wasn't just a necessity. It was a culture, a religion, a drug. Humans weren't peaceful. They were perfected violence. And someone, some group, was still watching. The messages didn't stop. Each one clearer. More direct. "You want a war?" the human voice said. "Then welcome to hell." The alien council didn't believe him. When Captain Sevar transmitted his emergency report back to the Ular Dominion's High Assembly, they accused him of exaggeration, of letting a few skirmishes rattle his judgment. Even after seeing the footage, blurry images of humans building kill zones from alien wreckage, laughing as they hunted the squad like prey, the Council dismissed it as an anomaly. Primitive aggression, they called it. Unrefined tactics. Javar knew better. He had seen dozens of species fight. He knew the difference between chaos and calculated violence. What the humans did wasn't panic. It wasn't desperation. It was methodical, trained. As if war wasn't just in their culture, it was carved into their DNA. Back on Earth, the second recon drone had just sent back new footage. This time, it wasn't just a few armed locals. They had found something buried deep beneath a mountain, some kind of facility, camouflaged so well that even the Dominion's scanning tech nearly missed it. But once they found it, Sevar couldn't stop staring at the feed. Weapons, thousands of them, not just guns, devices, prototypes, machines even the Dominion couldn't identify. Some looked ancient, others far ahead of anything humans should have been capable of. Experimental weapons etched with warnings, handwritten signs reading, "Project Doomspill and for use only if God abandons us." And people, humans in uniform, working around the clock. "Sir," said a technician, voice shaking, We ran a comparison on the symbols found on their uniforms. It matches data from Earth's own archives, military emblems. But this isn't official. This group doesn't exist in their public databases." Sevar's eyes narrowed. "Then who the hell are they?" The technician hesitated. "We believe they call themselves the Bastion, a rogue defense faction, hidden, autonomous, possibly centuries old." "How many are there?" "We don't know. The signals are spread across multiple continents. It's possible there are dozens of these facilities." Sevar stood in silence, staring down at Earth like he was seeing it for the first time. Not a weak planet, not a backwater, a weapon cache. He finally understood why they hadn't been discovered before. The humans weren't reckless. They were patient. Every war, every revolution, every civil collapse, it hadn't broken them. It refined them, hardened them. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared. "Unidentified object approaching," shouted the navigator. It's coming from Earth." Sevar turned toward the viewport just in time to see it. A single missile, burning hot through the vacuum, screaming towards their orbit. They didn't think humans could launch that fast. They were wrong. "Shields up," Sevar barked. The impact rocked the Chiranax, sending half the crew crashing to the floor. Lights flickered. Fires broke out across the engineering deck. It wasn't just any missile. It was designed with Dominion tech. Modified. Upgraded. How had they gotten access? Then he remembered. The first scout team. Their gear. Their weapons. Humans didn't just kill. They learned. "Return fire?" his second-in-command asked, blood trickling from his brow. Sevar hesitated. His pride wanted revenge. His training screamed for a counterstrike, but something deeper held him back. A primal fear that the more they pushed, the more humans would reveal. And if this was only the beginning— "Not yet," Sevar said, his voice low. "We're not just dealing with another species. We've awakened something old, something made for war." There was silence across the deck as his words sank in. Then, a new message flashed on the central screen. Another Earth transmission. This time, video. A man stood in front of a ruined scout pod, Dominion rifle slung over his shoulder. Mid-40s, calm eyes, tactical gear, smiling. "We've read your history," he said. "You fight for conquest, for power, for ego." He stepped forward, gaze cold and steady. "We fight for the thrill of it." The screen went black, and for the first time in his long, blood-soaked career, Captain Sevar felt fear. The Dominion fleet arrived 2 days later. 10 ships, armed to the teeth, each one capable of leveling cities. The High Assembly had finally taken Xivar seriously, though they framed it differently in their official communiqué. A show of strength to suppress rising threats from Earth's primitive species. Xivar didn't argue. Let them think it was a show of force. He knew better. He stood on the bridge of the Cheranax, staring at the fleet formation glowing in orbit above Earth. Massive dreadnoughts hovered like gods over the planet, blocking out parts of the sky. To the average human looking up, they'd seem like new stars, or perhaps omens. But the humans weren't looking up in fear. They were preparing. "We've intercepted over a dozen human military broadcasts," the Coam's officer reported. "Encrypted at first, but now they're wide open, almost like they want us to hear." Xivar's jaw tightened. "Play it." The voice that came through wasn't the same man from before. It was a woman this time, clear, confident, and calm. "You want to dance with monsters?" she said. "Then come closer. We don't bite, unless you beg for it." Her voice was followed by coordinates. A challenge. The council ordered a tactical strike. A single city, chosen for its remote location and low civilian density. They wanted a clean message. Submit or burn. Xivar didn't bother arguing. He had already warned them. The Dominion didn't listen to warnings. They only learned through blood. The dreadnought Valkyrian was selected to fire. It charged its plasma array and released a sun-sized beam toward the coordinates Earth's transmission had given. The city vanished. At first, the Dominion cheered, until 30 minutes later, when the Valkyrian went completely dark. No communication, no response, not even a distress ping. They tried to send a patrol to investigate, but before the smaller cruiser could reach it, a new object appeared in its path. Small, fast, human-made. It wasn't a ship. It was a carrier pod, full of soldiers in exosuits, hurling toward the cruiser like a comet. The humans had launched a boarding party into space. Xivar watched in horror as the live feed from the cruiser flickered. The crew fought, but it was chaos. These weren't untrained ground troops. They were specialized killers, moving like they'd done this before. Who the hell trains to board ships in zero gravity? Within 7 minutes, the cruiser was silent. Another ship lost. Xivar slammed his fist on the command console. "How are they doing this? They don't have the tech. They don't have the infrastructure." "They have something else," whispered his lieutenant. "They have intent." That night, another human message came through. This time, it was a recording of the Valkyrian's bridge, its command staff, executed, hung upside down in gravity locks like trophies. One of the soldiers walked past the camera, pausing long enough to whisper something before the feed cut. "Try harder." The Dominion ships locked their defenses tighter. Every gun charged, every soldier on edge. No one had seen this coming, except Xivar. He sat alone in his quarters, watching recordings of human history. Wars, revolutions, genocides, political betrayals. He watched as humanity thrived in chaos, adapted to disaster, evolved in hatred. They didn't just survive war. They needed it. And now that the Dominion had given them one, they were going to show the galaxy what happened when you dared to fight a species that was built to destroy itself. And win. Xivar looked into the void beyond the viewport and whispered to himself, "We didn't discover Earth. We unleashed it." They tried diplomacy next. After the loss of 2 ships and over 300 soldiers, the High Assembly finally understood this wasn't a standard suppression mission. They sent a delegation vessel, a white flag ship, unarmed, with the finest diplomats the Dominion had to offer. It was supposed to open a channel, request peace, and establish negotiations. Zevar didn't believe it would work. Not because he thought humans wouldn't listen, but because he understood their game now. They didn't want peace. They wanted proof. Proof that the galaxy's most arrogant empires could bleed. The diplomatic vessel never made it to the surface. It was intercepted mid-descent, rerouted via a hacked guidance system, and landed deep in the Siberian wilderness. Dominion sensors lost track of the crew for nearly an hour. Then, out of nowhere, a new signal lit up their consoles. Live feed, broadcasted across every Dominion channel. The diplomats were alive, bound, blindfolded, and kneeling in a snowy clearing. Behind them stood 6 humans, dressed in mismatched combat armor and civilian jackets. One of them wore a Dominion officer's cape like a trophy. The same woman who'd spoken before stepped into view. She wasn't smiling this time. "You came to talk," she said, pacing behind the hostages. "But you didn't come to listen. So let's make this real simple." She pulled a Dominion translator collar off one of the diplomats and held it to her mouth. "We are not a species you conquer. We are not a species you monitor. We are not your next project." The feed cut out with a gunshot. Only one of the diplomats was returned, in pieces, stuffed into a Dominion cargo pod and launched back into orbit. A message burned into his severed chest armor. "This is mercy. The next time, we erase you." The Dominion Council panicked. No longer united in arrogance, they began debating retreat, escalation, even full-scale annihilation of the planet. Zevar listened to the arguments with a numb expression, knowing none of it would matter. The humans had already won. Not militarily, not tactically, psychologically. Fear was growing, not just within the Dominion, but across other species watching from the galactic fringe. Rumors spread, whispers in backwater stations, pirate hubs, smuggler dens. Earth is awake. They turned war into an art form. They don't fear death. They train for it. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was awe. Some species began pulling their observers off Earth. Others started forming quiet alliances with human factions. There were even reports of mercenary groups defecting to fight with the humans, for the thrill, for the chaos, for the ideology. Because for the first time in centuries, someone was standing up to the galactic order and laughing in its face. Back on the Kirinax, Zevar sat in his command chair, watching the latest footage from a drone they'd snuck past Earth's orbital grid. It showed a human base built inside the ruins of a pre-apocalypse city. Detroit, he believed it was called. What caught his attention wasn't the humans' training, or the captured Dominion tech they were dismantling. It was the wall, covered in writing. Thousands of names etched by hand. Some were Dominion, some were human, some were other. Beneath it all, a phrase scrawled in blood-red paint. "We remember every empire that came for us." Zevar exhaled slowly. This wasn't about territory. This wasn't about politics or expansion or defense. This was personal. The humans didn't just want to win. They wanted to humiliate, to burn away the myth of alien superiority, to show the universe that the species everyone dismissed as emotional, erratic, and savage had been training for this their entire existence. They were war incarnate, and now war had come home. Word spread like wildfire. The attack on the Dominion fleet, the butchered diplomats, the war wall, every piece of it leaked across the galactic net. Systems that had never even heard of Earth were now watching shaky footage of human soldiers using stolen alien tech like it was their own. Governments panicked. Empires braced themselves. For the first time in centuries, the order was cracking. But Earth wasn't finished. Not even close. Inside one of the buried facilities, this one somewhere in what used to be South America, an alarm sounded. Not a warning of attack, a launch sequence, Underground hangars lit up. Steel doors the size of city blocks slid open, grinding against decades of silence. Rockets, fighters, experimental orbital weapons, projects once buried by treaties, shame, or fear, now surged to life. Above the planet, Zevar watched as a cluster of sleek, black ships rose into the atmosphere. "They're leaving the planet," said the sensor officer, stunned. Zevar stepped forward. "Where are they headed?" The room was dead silent for a few seconds, while data streamed in. Then the officer whispered, "Every ship is headed to a different Dominion colony." No one spoke. It was a message. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth, they were spreading. Colonial systems across Dominion space began sending distress calls within the hour. Mining outposts, agricultural moons, research stations, places that had never even heard of Earth were now under siege. But the humans weren't killing indiscriminately. They were targeted. They disabled communications first, crippled defense systems. Then they walked in, surgical, efficient, terrifying. They took Dominion officials hostage, raided archives, downloaded centuries of military data, then disappeared without leaving a single soldier behind. What they left instead were messages, written in Dominion blood, spray-painted across shattered walls and torn banners. "This is for the slave camps on Calyx 5. For the children of Razathul. Remember Eros Prime." Zevar felt his throat tighten. The humans knew, not just about the Dominion, about everything. All the dark history, the buried atrocities, the campaigns scrubbed from public record, the kind of secrets empires killed to keep quiet. Humans were broadcasting them across the galaxy, one attack at a time. The Dominion's grip was slipping. Worlds began to rebel. Minor species started rioting, demanding answers. Some even turned their weapons on their own governors. Because if humanity, a species no one had taken seriously, could rise up and fight back, why couldn't they? Zevar stared at the map of active human movements spreading through space like wildfire, red blips lighting up across 3 sectors now. "This isn't war," he murmured. "This is infection." And it wasn't random. It was personal. These weren't just acts of vengeance. They were surgical strikes against the Dominion's soul. For every colony they hit, every secret they exposed, they dragged centuries of cruelty into the light. And somewhere in the chaos, one name kept resurfacing. The Bastion. They weren't rogue anymore. They were leading. Every strike traced back to them, every encrypted feed, every target. And no one, not Zevar, not the Council, not the Dominion's most advanced AI, knew where they came from, how they coordinated, who led them. But one thing was clear. The Bastion wasn't trying to win a war. They were trying to break an empire, one memory at a time. They weren't born in one place. That was the first revelation. The Bastion wasn't a single government, army, or hidden nation. It was a collective, a mosaic of the broken, the forgotten, the betrayed. Soldiers who'd been court-martialed for questioning command. Scientists blacklisted for refusing to weaponize their research. Survivors of Dominion Black Ops programs. Even civilians whose homes had been accidentally bombed during peacekeeping missions. They came from everywhere. And they had one thing in common. The Dominion had destroyed their lives. The files Zevar recovered from a raided human installation told fragments of the story, not the kind of story told in textbooks or on diplomatic floors. This was the version scratched into walls by survivors too angry to die and too smart to forgive. It started after first contact, long before the invasion. The Dominion had sent observers to Earth under a false peace initiative. They studied, took samples, infiltrated governments, whispered to corporations, weaponized human division. When chaos broke out, Wars, disease spikes, economic collapses. The Dominion stepped in with a cure, with order, and in exchange, Earth gave them their poor, their prisoners, their debtors. It was slavery disguised as salvation. Entire generations disappeared into off-world rehabilitation programs. Parents told their children they'd be back someday. They never came home, but some escaped. And those who did remembered everything. The Bastion was born from that memory. Its founder was once a Dominion war asset, a young girl taken from Nairobi, trained in zero-G combat, then discarded when her usefulness ended. They left her to die on a mining moon. She didn't. Her name was Asha 19, and she didn't just survive. She thrived, built a resistance cell, took over a Dominion skirmisher, and then, quietly, over the next 10 years, she built the Bastion. Seaver watched a recovered video of her, standing before a crowd in a crumbling underground hall. Her voice was low, steady, sharp as a blade. "They wanted us forgotten," she said. "But we remember. And when memory becomes weapon, empires fall." Behind her, a massive screen lit up with Dominion emblems, each one crossed out. Below them, names, not of targets, of crimes. Operation Star Drought. Mass Relocation Protocol 7. The Razdal Erasure. And finally, Earth. Containment Project 01. Zivar gripped the console until his fingers ached. Containment. That had always been the word they used. Not destruction, not conquest, containment. Because somewhere, someone high in the Dominion had seen what Earth really was. A weapon. Asha 19 and her followers didn't fight like rebels. They fought like survivors turned surgeons, cutting deep, with intent, with purpose, not to overthrow the Dominion, to expose it, and they were winning. They called it Operation Purity. The Dominion's retaliation wasn't just a strike, it was a full-scale cleansing campaign. Fleet carriers by the dozens, orbital siege platforms, kinetic bombardment payloads the size of mountains. Every protocol that had once been marked too extreme for civilized use was greenlit in a single day. No more diplomacy, no more attempts to study or contain. The humans had embarrassed them, publicly, violently, and the Dominion had never tolerated humiliation. So they did what empires always do when afraid. They overcompensated. Zevar watched from the command deck of the Chiranax as the Earth offensive fleet moved into position. Over 300 ships now, forming an orbital net so wide that even the moon cast its shadow on their hulls. The Earth below looked quiet. Too quiet. Scans showed movement, but no response. No launches, no countermeasures. "They're waiting," one of the junior tacticians said. "For what?" Zevar muttered, almost to himself. Then the order came from High Command. "Commence planetary suppression. The first wave wasn't even meant to kill. It was designed to blind, to rip out the planet's satellite grid, scramble the atmosphere with electromagnetic pulses, and reduce every power grid to smoke and sparks. But the moment the first EMP detonated in the stratosphere, something changed. Every Dominion screen on every ship turned black. Then static. Then a single phrase appeared, etched in blood-red letters across the fleet's entire HUD system. "We warned you." The scream of alerts flooded the deck. Systems went offline. AI cores scrambled themselves in a panic. Even the Chiranax, the fleet's flagship, began to flicker and groan like it was being torn apart from the inside. "Multiple ships losing control," someone shouted. "It's not a hack, it's a virus." No one had seen it coming. The Bastion hadn't just prepared for this assault. They had designed it. They let the Dominion build their pride. Let them gather their forces. Let them march into orbit like gods descending from heaven. And then they pulled the trigger. 1,000,000 dormant code packets hidden in Dominion comms since the very first contact with Earth, now activated at once. A digital plague, written in languages Dominion firewalls didn't even recognize. Ships collided. Engines failed. Targeting systems spun out. Some ships turned their guns on themselves before anyone could shut them down. And then, the humans came. Not in fleets, not in neat, disciplined ranks like Dominion strategists would have expected. They came in waves, raiding parties, stealth pods, exosuits launched directly from mountain ranges, makeshift orbital gliders loaded with explosives, bristling with salvaged alien tech. One by one, Dominion ships started dropping from the sky, trailing fire like dead gods. Xavar's hands trembled. This wasn't just war anymore. This was revenge. Down on the surface, the Bastion launched its final operation, codenamed Ashfall. The goal wasn't to destroy the Dominion's army. That would have been easy by now. The goal was to broadcast. Every planet, every Dominion system, every species watching, everyone now saw what the Bastion saw. A live feed patched into galactic networks showed Dominion officers torturing prisoners. It showed slave pens, chemical sterilization camps, genetic experimentation, worlds harvested of all resources and left to rot. Footage pulled from Dominion archives, spliced with real-time camera feeds of soldiers screaming inside burning ships above Earth. And then Asha-19 appeared again. This time not in some underground bunker, but standing on the remains of a Dominion dropship. Blood on her boots, ash in her hair. "No more secrets," she said softly. Behind her, a burning Dominion flag toppled. "No more silence." She looked into the camera, eyes like frozen fire. "You taught us how to suffer. Now we teach you how it ends." She raised her fist, and the skies lit up. The orbital defense cannons, once thought disabled by the initial EMP wave, roared to life. Weapons long hidden in Earth's crust, beneath oceans, inside glaciers, even within ancient mountain ranges, now revealed themselves. Built not by modern governments, not by world powers, but by survivors. By engineers who never forgot. By dissidents who refused to move on. They'd been building this response for generations. The Dominion never stood a chance. By the end of the day, half the fleet was gone. The rest limped away, retreating, broken, silent. Xavar stayed behind. He didn't order his crew to fight, didn't try to flee. He stood on the bridge of the Chiranax, watching the earth slowly rotate beneath him, and whispered to no one in particular, "We created this. We made them monsters." And somewhere deep in his soul, he knew they had only seen the beginning. The war was over, but the galaxy wasn't at peace. What was left of the Dominion scattered like ash in a solar wind. Systems that once flew their banners burned them in public squares. Colonies that once bowed at their feet now hunted their governors in the streets. The empires didn't fall with a grand explosion. They rotted, fast and from the inside. But Earth didn't celebrate. No fireworks, no parades. Because the Bastion had one last message, one final broadcast, days after the last Dominion ship left Earth's orbit. Asha-19 stood beneath the shattered remains of what had been a Dominion consulate in Geneva, its once pristine walls now covered in the names of the lost. Millions of them. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Her voice was tired, honest. "You wanted to know what we are," she said. "What we were built for. Now you know." The camera panned slightly. Behind her stood not soldiers, but families, survivors, children who had never known peace, scientists who had cracked alien encryption just to survive, farmers who had turned their fields into minefields, every kind of human the galaxy had once dismissed. "We didn't want to conquer," she continued. "We wanted to live. But you made sure we could only live if we learned how to kill." She looked straight into the camera. You built an empire on forgetting. We remembered everything. The screen faded to black. Then, a final image. Let the galaxy rebuild. Without fear. Without you. And that was it. The Bastion didn't claim territory, didn't install governors or demand reparations. Earth remained quiet, its skies clear for the first time in months. The launch bays closed. The black ships landed and powered down. But the galaxy wasn't sure what to make of it. Some thought the humans were playing a long game, waiting to rise and rule from the ashes. Others believed they were too broken to continue, a flame burning too hot and too fast. Still, others whispered that the Bastion wasn't finished, that there were other enemies, other monsters hidden behind flags and treaties and gold-plated promises. And deep down, everyone feared one thing more than war: silence. Because humans didn't say what came next. They just watched, waited. Zavar was taken alive, not by soldiers, not even by the Bastion, but by a group of civilians in a refugee camp he'd helped build, for optics, for propaganda. They found him hiding in a ventilation shaft of a downed cruiser and dragged him out into the light. They didn't kill him. They made him see. They forced him to walk through what was left of the Razthul archives. Let him read the real numbers, the death tolls, the classified experiments he'd signed off on without reading. Then they left him in a shack with a solar-powered screen looping Asha 19's broadcast. Over and over. It was said he stopped speaking after 3 days, stopped eating after 7, stopped existing, even as his body kept breathing. A symbol of a dying age. Elsewhere in the galaxy, a quiet revolution was unfolding. Species long considered lesser by Dominion caste systems began rising into their own. New alliances formed, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Small planets once bullied into trade pacts and military conscription started negotiating fairly. And in the middle of it all, Earth remained still, rebuilding, quiet, watching. But those who truly paid attention noticed something strange. The Bastion didn't disband. They didn't return to their homes and fade into memory. They spread, not to conquer, to guard. Outposts built in asteroid belts, listening stations planted near old Dominion border worlds. A ship seen every now and then in contested space, silent, black, marked only with a symbol. A broken chain, wrapped in flame. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. That no matter who tried to rise next, no matter what empire grew fat with power and pride, humanity would remember. And when memory becomes weapon, empires fall. As the years passed, stories became myths. The war turned into cautionary tales for cadets, bedtime warnings for children of rulers. And yet, those who had seen the humans never forgot. Not their weapons, not their technology, not the look in their eyes. Because when the galaxy had tried to break Earth, it had only revealed what humans truly were beneath the surface. Not diplomats, not allies, not even rebels. They were scars turned into strategy, pain turned into precision, war made flesh. And though peace bloomed in the galaxy again, it bloomed under the long, cold shadow of a species no one would ever underestimate again. Because now everyone knew the terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't just made to survive war. They were built for it. Perfectly.